It has been 3,000 years since Earth was obliterated, reduced to nothing but ashes and echoes by the ruthless hand of the Galactic Council. What remains of humanity is scattered across the stars, living in the shadow of an ancient wrong, waiting for the day of reckoning. For centuries, Earth's survivors have lived in the vast expanse of the galaxy, scattered, broken, and powerless, but the seeds of revenge have been sown deep within them. Today, that seed is about to blossom. It began as a whispered rumor, a tale passed down from the few who survived a brutal assault. The Galactic Council, an empire spanning countless worlds, decided that Earth was a threat too dangerous to be allowed to exist. The humans, primitive and volatile as they were, had begun to show signs of greatness, of innovation, of power, of potential to rise above their humble beginnings. They were seen as an uncontrollable variable in the grand equation of the Council's dominance. Earth had to be destroyed, its people scattered, and their dreams crushed before they could even come to fruition. The Council's fleets arrived without warning, and in the blink of an eye, centuries of human history were wiped from the galaxy's memory. Earth was lost to the void, and its people were forgotten. But humanity is resilient. Even in the darkest corners of space, scattered across unfamiliar worlds, the human spirit refused to die. They clung to their memories, their cultures, and their hope that one day someone would rise to challenge those who had condemned them. For 3 millennia, the survivors watched as the Council grew stronger, more oppressive. The Galactic Council's grip tightened, their influence expanding to every corner of the universe. They ruled with iron fists, their influence felt in every system, on every planet. The stories of Earth's fall became little more than a myth, a tale spoken of only in hushed voices. But beneath that silence, a quiet fury grew. Humanity's thirst for revenge had festered, and the time had come to reclaim what was lost. It started with a single ship, a ship that carried no flags, no insignia, only the remnants of a species' wrath. The survivors had built a weapon, one that could pierce the heart of the Galactic Council itself. It was a weapon born from the ashes of Earth, forged in the belief that one day humanity would rise again. This ship wasn't just a means of transportation, it was a symbol of defiance, a beacon of vengeance. The ship's crew consisted of the most skilled, most determined humans from across the galaxy. Each one had a reason to hate the Galactic Council, to want to see it burn for the destruction of their home. Among them was a leader, a captain whose entire existence had been shaped by the destruction of Earth. They had lost everything, just like the others, but they had kept going. They had gathered their people, formed alliances, and prepared for this moment. They had spent years searching for the perfect opportunity, waiting for the stars to align, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now, that moment had come. The captain stood before the ship's command console, looking out over the empty expanse of space. The journey had been long and difficult, and they had seen the faces of countless allies fall along the way. But they had one goal in mind: vengeance. The Galactic Council would pay for what they had done. The ship's engines hummed to life, its weapons powered up. This was not just an attack, it was humanity's revenge. The plan was simple, but daring. They would infiltrate the heart of the Galactic Council, strike at their most vulnerable point, and dismantle their power from within. They had already begun to gather information, uncovering secrets about the Council's weaknesses, about the corrupt officials who had hidden themselves in the shadows. These were the ones who had ordered Earth's destruction, the ones who had sentenced their people to a life of exile. Now, humanity was ready to take back what had been stolen. But the journey to the heart of the Galactic Council was not without its dangers. The Council's fleet was vast, its warships nearly unstoppable. The ship, carrying the remnants of humanity, would have to navigate through uncharted territory, face down relentless patrols, and infiltrate the heart of an empire that had stood unchallenged for millennia. The crew would be tested in ways they could never have imagined, forced to rely on each other like never before. As the ship hurtled toward the Council's stronghold, the captain's thoughts turned to Earth, what had once been a thriving world, full of life, culture, and history. What had happened to it? What had become of the places they had once known? And most importantly, who were the people behind the destruction of their home? The captain had spent years thinking about this moment, but now that it was here, there were more questions than answers. They could only hope that the plan would work. But there was no turning back now. The silence in the command room was deafening as the crew prepared for the final phase of the mission. Each one of them had faced their own battles, their own losses, but now they were united for a single purpose: to make sure that humanity's name would be remembered not as the species that was destroyed, but as the species that rose from the ashes. The ones who had defied the greatest power in the galaxy and triumphed. But as the ship neared its destination, something unexpected happened. A warning flashed across the captain's console. A message, encrypted from an unknown source. The message was brief but ominous. The Council knows you're coming. You've already been marked. The captain's heart raced. How could the Council know? They had been careful, meticulous in their plans. Had they been betrayed? Was there someone among them who had turned? Someone who had sold them out? The tension in the room was palpable. The stakes were higher than ever before. They could no longer trust their instincts. They had to rely on each other. But the clock was ticking, and time was running out. The ship's trajectory had already been set. There was no way to back out now. The Galactic Council would have to pay for their crimes, no matter the cost. The screen flickered as the first blast from the Council's fleet hit the ship. The crew scrambled to their positions, but the captain knew that this was just the beginning. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. Humanity had come for its revenge, and nothing, not even the might of the Galactic Council, could stop them now. As the ship continued its course, the captain made a silent vow. Earth would be avenged, and humanity's revenge would be swift and unstoppable. But the true battle had only just begun. The captain stood still for a moment, heart racing as the warning flashed across the screen. The message from the unknown source: the Council knows you're coming. You've already been marked. Seemed like the last thing they needed in a mission already fraught with danger. The enormity of their objective weighed heavily on them. A warship crafted in secret, carrying humanity's last hopes, was now staring down the might of the Galactic Council's formidable fleet. Behind them, the crew scrambled, their faces pale but determined. The sharp, frantic movements around the room felt strangely out of place. Every person in this crew had their own reasons for being here, their own personal history marked by loss. They all had a reason to fight, but they didn't have much time. A voice broke through the tension, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Captain, we need to make a decision. We can't waste time wondering how they know we're coming. We've been preparing for this moment for years." We moved forward. It was one of the senior officers, someone who had seen the worst of what the Council was capable of, who'd watched countless worlds fall under their rule. They were not about to let another one fall, not without a fight. The captain nodded, even though their mind raced with questions. Who could have warned the council? Was there a leak? Someone who had betrayed them? How had the council been so swift to act, knowing their every move? But there was no time for those thoughts now. The countdown clock was ticking, and the ship was rapidly approaching the heart of the council's vast empire, the very place where Earth had once stood, where the final blow had been dealt to their people. "I'll take responsibility for what happens next," the captain said, their voice firm, though they knew the weight of this moment could break even the strongest resolve. Their fingers hovered above the console, preparing to initiate the next phase of the plan. They had spent years building alliances with distant species beings from forgotten corners of the galaxy, some of whom still remembered humanity's ancient glory. These beings had fought their own wars, suffered their own losses under the rule of the Galactic Council, and now they were here to help deliver the revenge humanity had long sought. Yet, even with these powerful allies by their side, the Council's reach was vast, and their military strength nearly unparalleled. In the silence of the ship's command room, the captain felt an uneasy realization settle over them. They were up against something far larger than they could have ever imagined. Behind them, the crew continued to work, their faces illuminated by the cold light of the command center. They knew this mission wasn't about survival. There was no chance of making it out alive if they failed. But that didn't matter. The mission wasn't about them anymore. It was about a message. It was about humanity showing the universe that they had not been broken, not by the destruction of Earth, and certainly not by the Galactic Council. The captain tapped the console, and a 3D projection of the Council's stronghold appeared in the center of the room, a massive, heavily fortified space station floating within the heart of a star system. The station was surrounded by a fleet of warships, their immense size dwarfing any human-made vessel. The Galactic Council had spared no expense in making sure their seat of power was impenetrable. This was the heart of their empire, a place that held more secrets than the captain could ever hope to uncover. But it also held the one thing that could bring the Council to its knees: information. The data they needed to cripple the Council's operations, to expose their corruption and their lies, was stored somewhere within that station. And that information was their key to turning the tide of war. We'll breach their defenses, infiltrate the station, and upload the data directly to the galaxy's network. "It's our only shot," the captain said, voice steely as they briefed the crew. "We won't make it out, but at least the truth will be out there for all to see." The crew's faces remained focused. They knew the stakes, and there was no turning back now. The whispers of rebellion, of revolution, had spread across the galaxy like wildfire in the years following Earth's destruction. From the ashes of their former home, the survivors had begun to rebuild piece by piece, world by world. But it had taken time, too much time. The Council had ensured that humanity would never rise again, had spread false narratives about their fall, making sure no one ever remembered what Earth had been. But now, in the cold depths of space, humanity was rising once more. The ship's engines hummed as they closed in on the station. The crew worked with precision, navigating through the Council's outer defenses. The mission was about to enter its most dangerous phase. Every move had to be calculated. Every decision must be made with care. One mistake, and they would be lost forever. The captain gave a final glance at the command center, meeting the eyes of each crew member. They were no longer just a group of individuals. They were a united force, a team of survivors who had learned to live, fight, and die for the same cause. The message of vengeance, of justice for Earth, would not die with them. But then, Just as the ship closed in on the final coordinates, a sudden, unexpected alarm blared. The ship shook violently, and the crew's eyes went wide in shock. A massive explosion rocked the hull of the vessel, sending the crew into a state of chaos. The station's defense grid had activated. "Captain, we've been detected," a voice yelled over the comms. The captain's heart pounded in their chest. They had been so close to delivering humanity's revenge. But now, the ship was under attack from every direction. The Council's forces were already closing in, their massive warships on the move. "Brace for impact," Captain ordered, but deep down, they knew that their plan was no longer viable. They were exposed. The element of surprise was gone, and now the Galactic Council would be hunting them down with everything they had. The crew fought to maintain control of the ship, but the odds seemed insurmountable. The walls of the command center shook as another blast hit. They were running out of time. Humanity's revenge was slipping from their grasp, but there was still one thing they could do, one final chance to send the message. But would it be enough? With a grim resolve, the captain activated the emergency systems. "Prepare to upload the data. It's the only way this ends. No matter what happens, the truth will be known." But deep within, the captain couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was just beginning. The ship rocked again, and the atmosphere in the command center became thick with tension. The crew was working frantically, each person desperately trying to maintain control, but the damage was significant. Sparks flew from consoles, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. The once steady hum of the engines had turned into a low, threatening growl, echoing the storm of chaos outside. Each hit was like a countdown to something inevitable, something they couldn't escape. "Shields are down to 30%, Captain." The voice of the weapons officer cracked through the noise, tinged with urgency. "We're taking direct hits from their capital ships. We can't hold out much longer." The captain gritted their teeth. The plan had been clear: dodge the defenses, infiltrate the station, and upload the data to the galaxy's network. But now that plan was on the brink of failure. The station was still heavily shielded, and despite their best efforts to dodge the incoming attacks, they were being forced into a desperate situation. The unexpected blast had caught them off guard, and now they were far too close to the heart of the Council's defenses. The mission was slipping through their fingers, and time was running out. "We need to disable their weapons systems, or we'll never make it through," the captain said, trying to steady their voice despite the pressure mounting in their chest. "Target their power conduits. Fire at will." The sound of rapid gunfire echoed through the ship as the weapons officer followed the orders, but it was too little, too late. The ship's hull shuddered again as another wave of blasts hit, knocking out half the remaining shields. The crew struggled to maintain their positions, but they were losing the battle. With every passing moment, it felt like the Council was tightening its grip on them, pushing them further into a corner. "We're not going to make it, Captain," the navigator said quietly, eyes wide with disbelief. "They've sent reinforcements. It's too much. We can't outrun them." The captain's mind raced, but they refused to let panic set in. Their mission was too important, too vital for the future of humanity. If they failed here, all hope would be lost. Not just for them, but for all those who had joined the cause, all those who had believed in the possibility of retribution. The galaxy's future would remain under the Council's oppressive rule, and humanity's legacy would be erased. But then, as if on cue, the ship lurched violently to one side, sending the crew tumbling. The console screens flickered out one by one, and the harsh alarms stopped, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. "Captain," a voice echoed, trembling in disbelief. "The transmission. It's going through." The captain's breath caught in their throat. It was impossible. The upload was complete. Against all odds, they had succeeded in sending the data. The truth, the evidence that could bring down the Galactic Council, was now out there for the entire galaxy to see. But the victory was bittersweet. There was no escaping the destruction that was unfolding around them. The ship was falling apart under the relentless barrage of enemy fire. There was no time to celebrate or even process what had just happened. The last stage of the plan had been set into motion, and survival seemed like an increasingly impossible task. The captain turned to their crew, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. They had come so far, endured so much. Every inch of their mission had been filled with peril, every decision made under the crushing weight of knowing that failure meant humanity's final defeat. And now they were here, on the brink of victory, but also on the verge of total annihilation. "Hold fast," the captain ordered, their voice low but steady. "We've done our part. Now we wait. Stay strong. The galaxy will know the truth." But the tension in the air was suffocating. As the crew huddled in silence, their faces lit only by the dimming lights of the ship, there was an undeniable sense that this was far from over. They had sent the message. The Council would be forced to act. But what would that action look like? Would it be the beginning of a revolution, or the spark of a new, even greater conflict? They had no way of knowing. Suddenly, the comm system buzzed to life again. It was the fleet commander from the Allied forces, humanity's ragtag coalition of rebel species, who had joined their cause. "Captain, we've intercepted a communication from the Council. They know what you've done. They're preparing for retaliation. And they're not just coming after you. They're coming after everyone." It's begun. The weight of those words hit the crew like a tidal wave. The Council was not just going to let the information spread without retaliation. This was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to be plunged into an even darker, more dangerous phase, and there would be no going back. But as the captain stared into the cold void of space, knowing what they had set into motion, a flicker of something powerful, something more than just fear began to ignite deep within them. They hadn't just defied the Council. They had forced them to acknowledge humanity's existence once more, to feel the weight of their wrath. They hadn't come back to simply survive. They had come to avenge Earth, to take back what was lost. And no matter what happened next, no matter the odds, they would not be forgotten. With their mission complete and their fate uncertain, they had no idea what would happen next, whether they would be wiped out in an instant or if the galaxy would be forever changed by the truth they had uncovered. But they knew one thing for sure: humanity's revenge had begun, and the Council would never be the same again. The silence in the command center was heavy as the crew absorbed the weight of their mission. They had succeeded in sending the data, but the consequences were still unknown. There was a sense of victory, but it was tainted by the looming threat of retaliation from the Galactic Council. The captain stood at the front, watching the dark expanse of space through the viewport, deep in thought. The feeling of dread was thick in the air, and it seemed to cling to the walls of the ship, suffocating them all. But then, a new signal flashed across the communications console, its pulse sharp and urgent. It was an encrypted transmission from the Allied fleet commander, but the message wasn't what anyone expected. "Captain, you need to listen to me carefully," the commander's voice crackled through the speaker. "We've intercepted something unexpected. The Council has. They've initiated something far worse than we feared. We thought we were prepared, but this is unlike anything we've seen before. The data you sent, it's already having consequences. The captain's heart skipped a beat. They had no idea what this new development was, but the commander's tone was enough to set the crew on edge. The seconds stretched long as the captain waited for an explanation. "What exactly is going on?" the captain demanded, their voice steady but laced with concern. "Damn it, Captain, they've activated the beacon," the commander replied, voice shaky with disbelief. "You've just triggered a galaxy-wide alert system. The Council has called in reinforcements far more than we could ever have anticipated. The beacon is meant to awaken sleeper agents, sleeper fleets, and there was a sharp intake of breath. They've unlocked their most deadly weapon." The room fell into stunned silence. The captain turned sharply, their eyes locking with the crew. They had known the Council would retaliate, but they had never anticipated something like this. The beacon, the very thing they had tried to prevent, was now activated. The implications were devastating. The Council had sleeper cells embedded across the galaxy, hidden and waiting for the right moment to strike. But it was worse than that. This wasn't just about military strength. It was a signal, one that would call every single one of the Council's dark assets into action. The captain's mind raced. Sleeper agents, spies, and operatives from every corner of the galaxy would be awakened. The Council had built a network so intricate, so vast, that it could strike without warning from the shadows. And now, every single one of them was on their way to track down the source of the transmission, the crew's ship. A new wave of urgency swept through the ship. The crew members scrambled to their stations, their faces pale, fingers flying over controls. It was clear now. The Council wasn't going to let this go. They had underestimated the reach and the sheer scale of the enemy they were up against. The captain knew that their victory had come at a steep price. The Council wasn't just going to stop at retaliation. They would stop at nothing to crush any hint of rebellion. The message they had sent out was already putting them in their sights, and the crew had just become the most wanted target in the galaxy. "We need to get out of here. Now," the captain ordered, voice hardening with the realization of what was coming. The crew worked furiously, but they knew the clock was ticking. Time was running out, and every second they wasted would bring them closer to the enemy. But before they could even begin to formulate an escape plan, the ship's sensors emitted a high-pitched whine. Another signal, one they hadn't expected, and one they hadn't been able to trace before. "Captain, you need to see this." The weapons officer's voice trembled, despite their efforts to remain calm. "There's a fleet coming, but it's not from the Council. It's us." The captain's heart dropped. "What do you mean, us?" "The signal, it matches the transmission we sent out," the officer explained. "But it's been altered, twisted. It's coming from humanity's own colonies, those we thought had been destroyed, abandoned. They're responding to the beacon." The crew stared in shock. Humanity's colonies, scattered across distant stars, had been thought lost. Many had fallen to the Council long ago with no sign of survivors. Yet, now, after 3,000 years of silence, a new fleet, one of human origin, was coming. But what did this mean? Had they been waiting all this time, hidden from the Council, preparing for a day like this? Or had something else triggered this response? Something far more dangerous? "We've got incoming," the navigator shouted, snapping the crew out of their disbelief. "A fleet of human ships, dozens of them. They're moving fast, Captain, but their signatures. Something's wrong. They're not aligned with our fleet. These ships are being controlled, but not by us. The captain felt their pulse quicken. Humanity's revenge was no longer just a distant hope. The long-lost colonies, the ones they had believed to be forgotten, these ships were coming to avenge Earth. But who controlled them now? And were they the same humans who had once been a part of the struggle, or had someone hijacked their mission? The comms crackled again. "Captain, this is the Allied Fleet Commander. We've got a serious situation on our hands. The human fleet we're seeing, it's already engaging the Council. But the ships are armed with weapons unlike anything we've ever seen. They're far beyond our current tech." The crew froze. The implications were staggering. The lost colonies had not only survived, they had somehow thrived. They had weapons that could rival the Council's, and they were now fighting their battle, not just for survival, but for domination. They had arrived to reclaim the galaxy, but how would they decide to use their newfound power? Would they seek to avenge Earth, or would they let the flames of destruction burn across the galaxy once more? In that moment, the captain knew the stakes had never been higher. The Council was no longer their only enemy. The truth of humanity's survival had led them into a deadly game where allegiances were unclear and where the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. Now, as the fleet of human ships loomed ever closer, one question burned in the captain's mind. Could they trust their own people, or would humanity's vengeance lead them all into a new, even greater war? The stage was set. The endgame had begun, and the consequences would echo across the stars. As the Allied fleet and the mysterious human fleet from the colonies prepared for a showdown with the Galactic Council, the tension in the command center was unbearable. The once silent space, so vast and empty, now seemed to pulse with energy as the approaching fleets drew closer. The captain stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the holographic displays that flickered in front of them. The crews worked furiously, the hum of machinery mingling with the soft whispers of anxious murmurs. There was no turning back now. The human fleet, a staggering force of warships, had made its intentions clear. They were no longer simply survivors of a lost war. They had become something else, something more dangerous. The ships, each one more advanced than anything Earth had ever known, had activated their weapons systems, positioning themselves between Earth's remnants and the Galactic Council. It was a declaration of war. "Captain," the navigator said, his voice strained, "we're being hailed by the human fleet. They want to speak with you." Without hesitation, the captain motioned for the communication officer to open the channel. The screen blinked to life, revealing a commanding figure clad in the armor of a long-forgotten military faction. The officer's face was stern, cold even. "We've been waiting for this moment," the officer said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The time of the Council's tyranny ends today." The captain's mind raced. This man, this officer, he looked human, but there was something unsettling about him. The tone of his voice, the way his eyes gleamed with purpose, suggested that this was not just a fight for survival. It was a war of vengeance, one that ran deeper than anything the captain had ever imagined. "We didn't ask for this war," the captain said, their voice steady despite the rising tension. "We didn't ask for any of this. We only wanted to stop the Council's destruction. Can we find another way?" The officer's lips curled into a grim smile. "Another way? Do you think there's another way? The Council didn't leave us with choices, Captain. They killed our ancestors, they wiped out our home, and they thought we would stay silent, stay hidden. But no more. We are humanity's last hope, and we're taking what is ours." The words hit the captain like a physical blow. Humanity's last hope. The officer's statement made it clear that the long-lost colonies had harbored a deep resentment, not just for the Council's destruction of Earth, but for the way humanity had been forced into hiding for millennia. The survivors had suffered, and now they were reclaiming their power, their place in the universe. The officer's hand raised, and a new set of data streamed across the screen. It was a plan, a strategy that would crush the Council's forces and dismantle their hold on the galaxy. The captain could see the brilliance in it, the sheer scale of the operation. The human fleet had built an army in the shadows, prepared to strike where it hurt the most. They were about to engage in a battle that could change everything. It was a fight, not just for vengeance, but for survival. And yet, as the captain processed the data, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of their mind. Something was off. It was too perfect, too calculated. The human fleet's advanced technology, their well-coordinated strategy, it all seemed too polished for a group that had been thought to be lost for so long. "Captain, we have a problem," the navigator suddenly interjected. "I'm detecting something, a massive energy surge. It's coming from the human fleet." "What do you mean, an energy surge?" the captain demanded, dread creeping into their voice. The navigator's face paled as the reading scrolled across the console. "It's not just weapons. It's something else, something more powerful than anything we've ever encountered. It's coming from their flagship. Whatever they're planning, it's not just an attack on the Council." The captain's blood ran cold. The human fleet was preparing something far worse than a simple battle. They were about to unleash a weapon of unimaginable power. "Open a channel to the flagship," the captain ordered. "Now." Comms officer quickly complied, and once again, the face of the commanding officer appeared on the screen. But this time, there was a glint in his eyes that was unmistakable, a cold, calculated gleam. "I warned you, Captain," he said, his voice dripping with a dark promise. "This is not just about vengeance. This is about evolution." The captain's mind reeled. Evolution? What was he talking about? "You see," the officer continued, "we've learned much during these long years of exile. We've learned to harness technologies beyond even the Council's wildest dreams. And we've unlocked something ancient, something buried deep within our genes." The captain's stomach churned as the officer's words sunk in. This was not a war of survival. It was a war for something else entirely, a war for domination. "Do you think you're the only ones who can change the galaxy?" the officer sneered. "No, Captain. Humanity is no longer bound by the limitations of your ancestors. We've evolved. We are no longer the weak species the Council once destroyed. We have transcended our humanity, and we will reshape this galaxy in our image." The captain was struck by the realization of what was happening. The human fleet wasn't just seeking revenge. They were seeking to become the dominant force in the galaxy, to reshape the universe according to their vision. The weapon they were about to unleash wasn't just a means of destroying the Council. It was the means of erasing all opposition and claiming absolute power. "No," the captain whispered, horrified. "This wasn't what we were fighting for." But it was too late. The weapon, a massive energy pulse designed to eradicate not just the Council, but entire star systems, was already charging. The human fleet's true intention had been revealed. It was not just about revenge, it was about rewriting the galaxy's future. In that final moment, as the weapon's energy reached critical levels, the captain faced a terrible choice. To stop the weapon would mean losing the human fleet's support, but to allow it to fire would doom countless innocents to extinction. The fate of the galaxy now lay in the balance. But then, Just as the weapon was about to discharge, the captain made a decision. A split-second decision to override the system and deactivate the weapon. They understood the consequences of failure, but they also understood that humanity could not become what they were destined to become through destruction. The energy pulse died, but in the silence that followed, the captain knew one thing for sure: this war was far from over. The twists of fate were far from finished, and the battle for the soul of humanity had only just begun. The end had not come. Not yet. The sudden silence that filled the room was unbearable, like the calm before a storm. Humanity had fought tooth and nail for this moment, this chance to reclaim the earth that had once been stolen from them. As the last of the invaders, the high-ranking officials of the Galactic Council lay defeated on the shattered ground, there was no immediate sense of triumph. It wasn't over yet. The galaxy may have feared humanity's wrath, but the deepest fears were still swirling around what came next. The central hub of the space station, the last stronghold of the enemy, was no longer a place of power. The vast halls that had once echoed with the voices of the Council now lay silent, save for the faint hum of the remaining systems trying to reboot after the devastating attack. The survivors, scattered across the battlefield, were starting to regroup, each of them battered but not broken. Yet, it wasn't the physical toll that weighed on their minds. It was what loomed on the horizon. As the leader of the human resistance moved through the crumbling corridors, every step was deliberate, as though each choice, each action from this point on, carried the weight of an entire species. They'd endured unspeakable horrors over the last 3,000 years, humanity's history reduced to ashes after the Galactic Council's annihilation of Earth. And now, after centuries of hiding, of enduring oppression, humanity had finally come to reclaim their place among the stars. But what would they do with this power? What would be the cost? They stood before the Council's throne room, the final symbol of their adversary's reign. The door swung open with a mechanical screech, and the remnants of the enemy's leaders lay sprawled across the floor. Their eyes, once full of malice and superiority, now reflected nothing but the crushing weight of their defeat. Yet, the human leader couldn't shake the feeling that this victory came at a high price. The planet they had once called home, Earth, was no longer the lush, thriving world it had been before the invasion. It was a barren wasteland, scarred by years of war and devastation. The survivors that had returned to reclaim it had done so with the knowledge that they would need to rebuild it from the ground up. But even with their newfound strength, could they truly heal the wounds of an entire world? They had come here, to this moment, to destroy the power that had nearly erased their existence. But it wasn't just about vengeance anymore. The real battle was about choosing the future that humanity had to fight for. As the resistance leaders stood over the fallen, a realization struck them. There would be no easy solution to the galaxy's problems. There could be no immediate peace after centuries of tyranny and death. The journey that lay ahead would be fraught with uncertainty. For the first time, they understood the true meaning of power. It wasn't about destroying enemies or seeking revenge. Power was the ability to make choices that shaped the fate of generations to come. And now, the responsibility of those choices weighed heavily on their shoulders.